Hello and welcome back to another episode of Notion Bonsai, and today we're back with my Cascade Juniper. We're going to be giving it a second styling now and just take it that little step further on its way to becoming a great bonsai. And stick around to the end of this video where we open an exciting package. Alright, so this is the Juniper Cascade that we're going to be working with in this video today. This is part 3 of working on this juniper and creating a bonsai from it. So if you haven't seen the other videos related to this tree, I will leave a link to them in the description of this video. And as you can see from when we last worked on this tree, it has put on so much growth since then. It's getting kind of hard to see the branch structure now. At the beginning of the growing season, just as the tree began to grow, I took off all of the wire just as it began to bite into the tree. Honestly, I think I might have taken it off a little too early because some of the branches reverted back slightly into a direction that I don't want them to go, so we will correct that today. So when you remove wire from a tree and you see it biting in a little part of the tree, it's not really recommended to remove it all at once like I did. Only remove it where it is biting in. And throughout the whole growing season, I fed it with a high nitrogen fertilizer with the NPK value 10-10-10, which is now available on my new shop, notionbonsai.com. If you guys are interested in it, I will leave a link to that in the description. And now before we begin, the tools that we'll be using throughout this video today are some twig cutters, branch cutters, wire cutters, some bonsai tweezers, a wire brush, a nylon brush, and if you don't have one of these, you could always use a toothbrush, and some gin pliers. And as always, by no means do you need all of these specialized bonsai tools. If you're just getting started in bonsai and you're a complete beginner, you can get by with a pair of garden scissors or some secateurs. You just want to make sure that whatever tools that you are using are clean and sharp. Clean so we don't introduce any bacterial or fungal infections to our trees, and sharp because a sharp pair of scissors will give you a much cleaner cut, and in horticulture, sharp clean cuts heal so much faster and more efficiently than a blunt cut that was squashed by a dull blade. So just starting off at the base of this tree, there's some moss beginning to grow on this area of the trunk. So I'm just going to take a nylon brush and do a little bit of scrubbing here just to loosen up the moss. And because this kind of goes into the soil from the trunk, on this instance, I wouldn't really advocate for using some diluted white vinegar as it may alter the pH of the soil too much. But if you had moss or something like algae growing up further on the trunk, then I would say it's okay to use up here. And again, if you don't have a nylon brush, you can use a toothbrush, and then if there's any hard to reach areas that are further in, like in here, I'm going to go in with the bonsai tweezers and just take that out, because moss can get in all sorts of places and it's good to deal with it where you can see it. And the reason why we remove moss like this is because if moss stays in an area for too long, we can have too much moisture in that area, and then as a result of that moss being there, the trunk of the tree can actually begin to rot at the bottom. So I just like to take this out as I see it every time I work on a tree. Then I'm just moving on to the wire brush to get the trunk. Give this a little scrub. As I work on this here, I can see that there's a hole in the trunk. I didn't make this hole, it's just where soil was previously, and I was able to push the tweezers right through there. So perhaps in the future we can actually make this a feature of the tree. There's also a layer of moss and algae on the top of the pot here, so I'm just going to scrape this off and renew the top layer of soil. And by taking off the moss like this, or any previous fertilizer that has built up on the top of the soil, this means when I water the tree, the water will be able to penetrate down into the pot more efficiently, ensuring all the roots get water, keeping the tree healthy. And this is just my standard bonsai soil mix of pumice, akadama, and lava rock. When I first worked on this tree, I deemed this to be the front or preferred viewing angle. But with Cascade, sometimes you can get away with having two fronts. This could also be a possible front for this tree. Personally, I think this side looks much better. And when you come back to a bonsai like this, and when you first styled it, you had it looking really nice. You had a clear plan of how it was going to go. You got all the pads looking nice. And then when it overgrows like this, it can be a little bit overwhelming, especially if you're a beginner, as what to do to the tree after you let it grow out and get healthy. The reason why I let this one grow out all summer is because I want to do some pretty drastic pruning on it today. There's a few major flaws that I think this tree has. My idea last year was to have these two pads. It sort of splits in a Y shape on the trunk. Have this as a pad up here and this as a pad down here. That could work for the design of this bonsai, but just in my opinion, both of these pads, the way in which they emerge from where they split, both branches are the same thickness, and in my eyes that is this having a competing trunk line. Where this trunk comes down, it splits right here. I move these out of the way, you can see. I really want the trunk to have taper on the way down, so it starts nice and thick up at the base, tapers down, tapers down, tapers down, and eventually it gets nice and delicate at the end. Just if it comes down and it splits into the same thickness, that is not what I want to achieve with a Cascade. I'm gonna take a black bag, and I'll start by just covering this front branch to see how the tree would look without this. So as you can see from this side, this is how the tree would look without the other branch. Removing one of these branches doesn't really take away from the Cascade aspect of the tree. I feel like having both of them is also very distracting. And I think because I want this as my front, I think it makes more sense to remove the branch at the back, because wherever I cut this, if I cut the front one, the scar would be at the front of the tree. And that's not really something that I want. I want all of the scars to be at the back. That way they're not easily seen and it doesn't distract the viewer when they're looking at the tree. So before I do this, let me know down in the comments, would you keep the Y shape of the tree or would you remove one of the branches? It'll be really interesting to hear what you guys think of this decision. It's quite a big decision, but I think it is for the best. You could also air layer this off, but I have so many needle junipers that air layering this isn't really worth my time. So just coming in with the branch cutters. So this is all that I have removed. And I think this makes the tree look so much better. As you can see, it tapers nicely. There's some branches up here that we can keep for pads further up. I want to have layers, so that will be the top, then another layer and another layer. And I think through time, we could train this branch into becoming another pad combined with this one, following the trunk line down. And again, right here, I feel like I could have a recurring problem where eventually, if these two were to grow, we could get the exact same problem that we just had with competing trunk lines, because these two branches are about the same thickness. So for that reason, I'm going to correct this pretty much right away and remove this branch. So now coming to the end of the branch, it tapers nicely the whole way to the end. And then just taking some cut putty. These are both cut putties that I make myself and are available on my store. I've got two colors available and I've made two colors for a very specific reason. If you haven't seen the video on how to make this cut putty yourself, go check it out. I'll leave a link up here. So we have got a grey colour and a brown colour. And the only difference between these two putties is simply the colour. I made two colours so it's easier to blend into the bark of whatever tree you're applying it to. Generally the grey one with the black label is used more on deciduous trees like maples, elms with that sort of silvery bark. The grey colour blends in a lot easier, but with conifers I find this brownish reddish colour blends in a lot better. So I'm just going to come in with the branch cutters and clean up the cut a little first. Just like that. You want to make sure that your finger is wet before putting it onto the tree. So I'm just going to take it, push it like this, and this will just help keep moisture out of the tree while also keeping moisture in the tree. And this cut putty is antifungal and antibacterial, so it will help the cut recover without any problems getting into your tree. Then I'm just going to do the same with this cut on the underside, covering that up nicely. And I think this brown color blends in pretty seamlessly. Really hard to see that there's any putty even on there. But if you guys do try this yourself, let me know in the comments what you think of it. Now I would like to turn my attention to the top of this tree. This is known as the crown of a Cascade or the semi-Cascade. But before I start wiring and shaping the top, as you can see, if I lift this up, the foliage is quite dense. There's a lot going on. So I'm going to cut this back a little, try and push the foliage back in the tree, cut everything in. That way we get back budding further in and the foliage growth becomes even tighter. By pruning the ends of the branches like this encourages junipers to back bud. That combined with having the needles and old needles well cleaned out on the inside of the planting. And you also want light to be able to fully penetrate into where you want back budding to occur. Anywhere light can reach on the inside of the planting is areas where you're more likely to get back budding. So if you have all this growth on the top and it's shading out them nice branches inside, it's not likely that anything that grows in there is going to survive. always leaving some growth on the branches, because if you leave a branch completely bare with no foliage on it at all, there is a good chance that that branch could die off, which is quite unfortunate. So always leave some growth on a juniper when working on it if you want to keep that branch. See here where it's just no foliage here because of the old needles. If I pluck these out with my hand, they're ready to fall off anyway. We've got some green here. If I let this grow and keep growing, it will get quite long and spindly. So what I'm going to do is come in, take the end off this here like that, and that will encourage more back budding further in. Taking another branch like this, just putting it like that, pushing the growth back all over. And when it comes to this phase of pushing the growth all back, especially with the blue star juniper, you can really see why it is called a blue star juniper. If you look at this little piece of foliage here and I print it back, you can see in here, it looks like a little blue star. Let me just show another example here. You can see that little blue star there. So I want to create blue stars over the whole tree. And if you can see all of these little blue stars all over the tree, that's a good sign that you're doing something right in pushing the growth back. But for example, I just took out the top of this branch here, made a little blue star in the middle. But then when you see this branch, you may be thinking, Adam, I can also create blue stars here by doing all of these ones here. I wouldn't advocate for doing every single branch that you could see that could be turned into a blue star, because if you do it to every single one on the tree, this could negatively affect the health of the tree, because at the ends of these branches there is a lot of auxins or growth hormones, and if you remove every single tip off of a juniper all at the one time, it isn't really good for the juniper. I like to leave some on, and if there's tips like this even further back in the tree, they will grow pretty much right away and become new branches. But if you take every single one of these off the tree is going to have to spend quite a lot of energy developing new tips to grow into branches, and this can set the tree back quite a lot. It can be quite detrimental to its health. So for example, if I take this branch here, I'll blue star this area, take out this central leader, and even though it's got all these other tips, I'm going to keep all of them. They will grow, and then next year we can cut the tips off of them, and year by year this will get more and more dense. As long as there is some tips, that's okay. So this is definitely going to be the apex of the crown. You can't really see the trunk line. If I pull this back, you can see the trunk line behind all of this here. This is one possible option. Another option is to remove all of this completely and have this be the leader of this. Again, there's a Y shape here, so I'm going to remove one of these. I'm going to remove this one because this one already has a nasty scar up in this area. It could take a while to heal. But also, if I remove this one, it's got quite a rigid angle, which I'm not the biggest fan of. So I'm going to go for the more graceful option where the trunk flows upward. Let's get rid of this. Again, quite a drastic option today, but it is for long-term benefits. I didn't prune back every single branch because, for example, on these lower ones down here, I don't know whether or not I'm going to keep it or not quite yet. My decision may change when I come to wiring. So I've kept it for now, then we can come back, decide later when we have shaped it. To wire this, because it is such a heavy branch, I'm going to be using some pretty heavy wire. I believe this is 4mm aluminium bonsai wire. I'm going to measure it up along the branch. I'm probably going to anchor it down at the base of the trunk here. So that little hole that we found earlier is actually coming in pretty handy. I can use this as an anchor. And because I want to bend this branch in this direction, I'm going to be taking the wire around this way. You always want to twist the wire in the same direction that you want to bend the branch. That's coming this way. You want this to be nice and tight against the trunk. Junipers are pretty tough, so if you tighten the wire onto them and twist it, they can handle it much more than a deciduous tree can. Because this is quite a big thick piece of wire, it's hard to do with your fingers, so you can just coil it around like this. So I've wired from the base to this point here. I've stopped here because now I'm going to wire this branch to this one. That way each branch is anchored to the other. We're going to use one piece of wire to wire two branches, and in bonsai this is known as the 2-branch principle. Just measuring it along that branch and along this one, leaving a little bit extra for around the trunk. I'm just going to come in here, and again I'm following the same pattern and coil of the last wire. Not only does this give you nice neat wiring, but it also ensures that the wire is still going the same direction around the trunk. So as you can see on this part of the tree, I would like this part to come a little bit closer to the trunk here, rather than the crown sitting away up here. By simply pulling it down just a little, the visual flow of this cascade looks a lot nicer. Now, to safely be able to pull this branch closer to the trunk, I'm going to be doing a technique that I seen from Xavier's channel over at Xavier's Bonsai Retreat. If you haven't seen any of Xavier's videos, I highly recommend you check them out. He's got so many cool projects going on all at the one time. But the technique that I seen on his channel was actually from another YouTuber called Kenneth. His channel is Kenneth Dubont. He also has some really cool videos. I highly recommend you check out his channel. So to do this, I'm just taking a pretty long piece of scrap wire. I'm just going to wrap it around this branch like this, leaving this end hanging like that. Then with this other end of the wire, I'm going to wrap it around the trunk of the tree, just in the same way we did the other side. And that leaves us with a hanging piece of wire. Then I'm going to take these two wires and intertwine them together. And just by simply tightening this piece of the wire, I'm going to grab the gin pliers just to help me do this a little more accurately. And as you can see, as I tighten this wire without harming the tree, it's going to pull the branches closer and closer together. And the advantage of doing it this way means you can just tighten the branch until it gets to the point where it's about to start cracking. Leave it like that for a day, then come back another day, tighten it a little half turn more, and slowly and progressively we can get a bend into this branch that we want in a safe way. This is slightly different from how Kenneth did it. So at the apex of the tree now, as you can see, it is beginning to look quite thin. There isn't really much foliage going on. And I would maybe in the future like to remove this quite heavy branch right back here. But because I've removed so much from the apex today, I'm going to keep this branch as a security in case this one doesn't make it. It's unlikely that it will, but I do like to be safe with things like this. So I'm going to keep this one for today. We may find a use for this even in the future when it fills out. It could even become a deadwood feature. This branch down here, I'm going to wire next, and this will be the first pad of the cascade. One of the best tips I could give when making pads on a juniper is to look at it from the top down, because when you do this, I'm going to put a little piece of a black plastic bag behind this so you can really see the pad we're working with. I'm putting a slight bend into this, that way the branch has some nice movement as it grows older and thickens. But you're also able to see where the foliage is coming from. There's quite a lot of foliage on the underside here. There's foliage coming from this part. I'd like to just rotate this slightly. That way the pad is more flat. And then from here, any branches that's growing straight down, I'm just going to cut off. These ones I feel are a little bit too far in. I'm just going to prune everything in, make this nice and compact. This part here is growing quite long, so we can cut that into here. This is growing straight up, so we can remove this altogether. This part is growing down, but I think I'm going to leave it because it's coming at a nice part here. This branch is on the inside of a bend, but I'm going to keep it for now because I don't want to take too much off of this. Even then with this, I could cut this off, bend this so it fills that space. This part back here could become a part of this pad also, which I'm going to do. I really like how it comes from the outside of the bend there and down into it. This wire is a little bit heavy for this branch because it's the wire that came off of that one, but I've just made an open coil to guide this where I want it to go. I'm going to put that right there. I'm just going to keep all the foliage on the end of this so it can get thicker in the next year. That's a nice wide pad, and in time this will look so much better. I just give it a little movement. The next pad is going to be here, and as you can see, these branches are quite sparse, long and spindly with no foliage to cut back to in here. We've just got a little tuft of foliage at the end. So to get back budding, we'll cut a little bit off the ends just to encourage it to back bud. And now that this is open, lots of light's going to get in here. So next year, we'll get lots of back budding along here. We can cut back in further, and then eventually we will have a little pad here. So again, on the ends of here, I'm going to take the ends off. These next parts here, I'm just going to thin out, and we can deal with this part. And I think on that's all I'm going to do with this tree for today. Next spring, I really want to get this tree into a nice ceramic, maybe unglazed bonsai pot, a nice tall cascade pot. Because as this tree is as a cascade at the moment, the plastic pot that it's in, the cascade is hitting the side of the pot and it's not really helping the design. Today it was almost like we took this tree 2 steps back in order to take 1 step forward next year. And a lot of times in bonsai, this is the case. Trees look worse before they look better. We took quite a lot of foliage off of this tree today, and before winter comes around I may even spray this whole tree with an anti-transparent in order to preserve the moisture in the tree. That way the tree is less likely to get what's known as frost blush, which is when the foliage on junipers like this turns an orangey colour from the cold. And if the tree has very little foliage to begin with and it gets frost blush, I have found needle junipers can die off. So later, as it comes into the dormant period of the year, I will probably treat this with an anti-transparent depending on what growth it pushes out between now and winter. And now it is time to open this exciting package. A couple weeks back, I had a friend, Chris, come and visit my garden. His channel is called CM Bonsai, and Chris sent me this last week. I did open it, I did use it, and I really love it. So let me just show you guys this. I really love how ornate it looks, and the red color from it is just absolutely beautiful. And this entire thing was made by Chris. So let's get this open. As you can see, there's a little clip here. It unfolds, and just look at this. Let me spin it around this way, open it up flat this way. It may be a little tricky to see what it is at first, but this is a tool roll for all of my bonsai tools. So Chris has done the honor of putting my logo in the corner here. I think it looks really great, really well made. And I think this material is the thing that they use on ships, on boats. And then down at this bottom corner here, he has got made by CM Bonsai, and that is his channel. I really do love this. I think the material is super strong. It's breathable, so if it gets wet, it's not going to get moldy. It sort of lets water out. The stitching on it is done really well. A massive thank you to Chris for sending this over. Let's get some tools into it. This one flaps down from the top only and not the bottom, where Chris's really covers everything. So if you're traveling, your tools aren't going to fall out. This one I found, even if I'm traveling to somewhere like Dublin and I roll this up, the tools always find a way of like falling out that way. I'm not gonna have that problem with this. And also when Chris was here, it took a note of all my tools so we could get the sizes and things, and even the attention to detail with this part here, because he did say he was going to make one when he was here. And I said, can you please put one and have a section for the bonsai tweezers? And he really got the size nailed here. This is just perfect. Look at this. The tweezers just go in there, no problem. I really love things like this that is handmade and specialized, because the quality of it is just so much more supreme than something that is mass produced in a factory. So again, Chris, thank you so very much for this. And there you guys have it. On that, I'm going to end off this video right here. If you enjoyed, please be sure to leave a like on this video. It really helps out the channel a lot with the YouTube algorithm. And please let me know what you thought of this video down in the comments below. Perhaps you would have done something differently to this juniper cascade. Maybe you wouldn't have gone as hard pruning as I did. I'm always open to new and different ideas in bonsai. If you would like to support me and the things that I do on this channel, hit the thanks button down below. Or if you would like to become a channel member, hit the join button. If you'd like to check out my new online store, which has just launched, it is notionbonsai.com. And if you'd like to keep up to date with all the things that I do off camera, please follow me on Instagram. It's @notionbonsai, and you can see all the things that I do on there. But on that, thank you so very much for watching.